Well, good morning, River Church. Pastor Mark with you here. Thanks for joining us and being a part of our Memorial Day online worship experience here at the River. Really, just joyful to be coming to you today and very reflective today to be coming to you from the Tuskegee Airmen Memorial here at Swickley Cemetery, just down the road from the church, not too far away. Tuskegee Airmen, just an amazing story of a group of black African-American pilots during World War II. And just an amazing story. If you don't know about the Tuskegee Airmen, you should look it up. A beautiful memorial here at Swickley Park. You'll see some more close-ups of that as I'm probably talking right now. You'll get to see that. But today is Memorial Day, and so our message is going to be centered kind of around that theme, and next week we'll begin a brand new sermon series at our church. And the title of this message today is called The Heart of Sacrifice, because at the heart of Memorial Day is sacrifice. And I would say to you that at the heart of the Christian faith is obviously sacrifice. But first, as we begin today, to talk a little bit about our country and the sacrifice that so many have made. Memorial Day is focused on those who did not come home, who paid the ultimate price, who gave the ultimate sacrifice. Veterans Day is for those who have served or are serving. And so we don't want to forget them, and we're incredibly thankful for them. But as they'll even tell you, Memorial Day is a time to just exclusively remember those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. You know, in the first 100 years of our country, 683,000 Americans lost their life in the name of freedom. Now, sadly, out of those 683,000, 623,000 of them died during the Civil War. Actually, so we, during the Civil War, make up 91% of those casualties came fighting each other, which is kind of very sad, but was fighting for the freedom of those who were in slavery. And so that in the first 100 years of our country, 683,000 Americans were lost. In the next 100 plus years up to today in our country, around 626,000 people have lost their lives defending freedom. And that encompasses two world wars, Vietnam, Korea, Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on. Now, those are not just numbers. Those are people, and those are personal. And I can honestly tell you that for me, for so long, it wasn't very personal. I was moved by it. I was thankful for the sacrifice made. But then in 2016, one of my former students and one of my that I had in my youth group as a youth pastor, and also was his soccer coach, Ryan Gloyer, who was a Green Beret, he died in Afghanistan fighting and training Afghan fighters to fight against the Taliban. And he lost his life in 2016. And in 2018, I got to go to Arlington Cemetery, and I was actually in Arlington Cemetery on Memorial Day weekend. Now, it was an incredibly overwhelming, moving experience to be there on Memorial Day. It actually was almost too much. And for me, it became very, very personal. As I stood next to Ryan's grave, and Ryan, actually, since that time, Seneca Valley's middle school has been named after Ryan. They changed the name to Ryan Gloyer Middle School. And it was incredibly moving. And one of the things, not only to be there and it be personal to me, because here is one of my former students who paid the ultimate price, but also I was there, and the people that were there in Section 60, which is basically people who have died in recent years, to be in section 60 on Memorial Day is incredibly moving and overwhelming. To see the families who make a day out of Memorial Day and they camp and have lunch and they just put up a tent and they sit next to that grave all day with their families. They eat lunch together, they share stories. It was incredibly moving. I saw this one young mother with a little boy that, was probably born when his father died. And they were standing next to and laying down actually next to the grave with this little boy who probably never met his father. And so it's not just numbers, it's very personal to those who paid the ultimate price. And at the heart of Memorial Day is sacrifice. So I want you to watch this video. We'll come back, we'll begin our message for today, but incredibly grateful for those who paid the price so that you and I could be even watching this right now, opening up this word together. Thankful for them. So watch this and we'll come back and begin our message.
When I look back through history and consider all the sacrifices in every war, and I try to grasp it all, come to grips with it, stand in reverence of all those willing to give their lives for something bigger than themselves, I am stunned by the sheer numbers. All those lives, all those families serving their country. I can't always comprehend it. My heart is not big enough to take it all in. That each one didn't come home. What they lost for their service. What we gained for their courage. Today, I stop to remember. Every single number is one soldier. One sailor who got up in the morning and put on a uniform. One Marine who answered the call to fight for freedom. One airman who knew the cost and went anyway. One man or woman who paid the ultimate price for many. And the freedom I live in now. Today, I remember.
Well, welcome back. Our culture every day preaches to us that selfishness will lead to joy, right? Everything we see, everything that's on TV, often it preaches the message, if you get your things your way and you get everything you want, that selfishness will lead you to joy. But again, as we said earlier, at the heart of Memorial Day and at the heart of the Christian faith is sacrifice. And so it preaches a completely different message. It preaches the message that sacrifice is actually the way that leads to joy. So I want to take you back 2,000 years. I want to take you back to the night before the greatest sacrifice ever made. So I want to take you back to that upper room in Jerusalem where Jesus gathers together with his disciples the night before he will sacrifice his life, the greatest sacrifice ever. Why did he make that sacrifice? He made that sacrifice for you and for me, to forgive us of our sins and to give us new life and hope and conquer death and hell itself. That is what was accomplished on the cross on Good Friday, on the very next day. But here we are just hours before the greatest sacrifice ever. Now, if you knew that you were going to make that kind of sacrifice, and Jesus knew the Father's plan for him, if you knew you were going to make that kind of sacrifice, or any huge sacrifice in your life that you would have to make, there would be anxiety, there would be fear. That's normal. When we come to a moment where we have to sacrifice, there might be anxiety and there might be fear. And that's part of this story too. But it's just a very small part. And it's not the heart of this story. And it's not at the very heart of sacrifice. This story is very reflective too. I think if you were coming to a moment where you had to sacrifice, even lay down your life, that there would be reflection going on as you would be thinking about what's really important to you and the things that are most important to you. So that's where we find ourselves in this story. We find ourselves in John 15 at that moment where Jesus is teaching his disciples hours before, knowing he's going to make the greatest sacrifice for them and for you and for me. And so yes, there's some anxiety, there's some fear, but I really want to show you what it's at the heart, because Jesus teaches us in these moments, like if you were going to die, you would tell people the most important things you could tell them. So we will see that at the very heart of these moments, at the very heart of Jesus is sacrifice. And in John 15, you'll see all the things that kind of flow out of that and kind of make up that time of sacrifice. Now look, I don't have time to go through every little verse of this whole chapter. So I'm just going to pick out some things and some verses that you'll see in these verses are at the heart of Jesus and at the heart of sacrifice. One of the first things that Jesus says to them is he says, and he teaches them and he calls them to remain in him, to remain in him, to stay connected to him. In verse 4 of chapter 15, he says, remain in me as I also remain in you. He says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. And so he says, the first thing you have to do, you have to prepare yourself. You have to remain in me. And when you remain close to me, you'll know my heart. And at the very center of my heart is sacrifice. Because at the very center of his heart is love, and sacrifice is always a part of love. And so right there from the beginning, we have to remain close to Jesus. We remain close to Jesus, we remain close to his heart. And then we are capable of doing the things that Jesus did. We're capable of sacrifice. We're capable of doing these things. So Jesus calls us to remain close to him because we need him. We need him to give us the strength and the power to actually sacrifice, because I don't know about you, but that's not my normal bent isn't where I'm just looking every day to go, where can I sacrifice and where can I give up things? And that doesn't always come naturally. In fact, I would say it doesn't come naturally to any of us. But when we have the heart of Jesus in us and we remain close to him, then we understand that sacrifice leads to joy. And sacrifice, it really is built in love. It is part of love. In verse 9, Jesus says, as the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. So this is all about love, because love and sacrifice are so tied together. And that sacrifice that God calls us to, it also in John 15, Jesus is teaching us that it flows out of obedience to him. Like he's called us to be people of sacrifice. He says in verse 10, if you keep my commands, his commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. Jesus obeyed his Father. That's why he laid his life down. He obeyed what his Father had for him to do. And so obedience leads us to sacrifice. Sacrifice also, though, it produces joy. There is joy in sacrificing. Again, not selfishness. Selfishness doesn't lead to joy. It leads to you getting what you want, but it doesn't lead to joy. Verse 11, Jesus says this in chapter 15, I have told you these things, like love each other, follow my commands. Why has he told us this? So that my joy may be in you. See, Jesus is filled with joy, even though his whole life has been a life of sacrifice. Do you get that? These two are so tied together. You cannot have joy without sacrifice. And so he says, I want you to have that same joy, and it may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. Did you ever think about this? That your joy in life will never be complete until you learn to sacrifice. You'll never have complete joy. You will, in fact, never, I'd say, have real joy until you learn to sacrifice. Because until you learn to love, which is inseparable from sacrifice, you won't have joy. And until you realize what was given for you, what God sacrificed for you, you won't have real joy. See, you were Jesus' joy. It tells us that in the book of Hebrews, that the joy set before him, Jesus endured the cross. What was the joy set before him? It was you. It was your salvation and mine. And for that joy, for the joy of you having the opportunity to come to know God and be forgiven, Jesus endured the cross and sacrificed everything. One of the other things I love about that I see about sacrifice in this, again, is love. We see love again in verse 12. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's own life for one's friends. I mean, this is a testament to that, how people laid down their life for their friends. Now, for most of us, we're watching this, we're probably not going to die in combat. We're not going to die as a martyr. But we are called daily to lay down our life. Now, there are people doing this all over the world for their faith in Christ, laying down their life for their friends. But you and I probably won't have to do that. But we are called to lay down our life for our friends and even our enemies and even strangers every day. Jesus calls us to lay down our wants for others. And honestly, sometimes I think that might be harder than losing your life, literally laying it down for good. That sometimes it's harder to do that day by day by day by day, to lay down our life for our friends, to sacrifice for them, for our family, to do that daily obedience, that daily long obedience every day, over and over again. We need to remain close to Christ to have the strength to be able to do that. Now, we also find from this passage in chapter 15 that sacrifice is really grounded in friendship, right? It's grounded in laying down our life for our friends, and there's amazing friendships that can be built when we're sacrificing for each other. Jesus in verse 14 of John chapter 15 says, "You are my friends." We're not just strangers to God. We're not just some random face, but we are his friends. Jesus says, "You are my friends if you do what I command." He says, "I no longer call you servants, because a servant doesn't know his master's business. Instead, I've called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you." I mean, these important moments, Jesus is giving them the most important things. And one of them is friendship. That friendship is so deeply needed in our culture. There are so many lonely people. There are so many people that are hurting. And if we would just sacrifice some of our time, our effort to build friendships with those who are in desperate need. And if we learn to sacrifice, one of the things that it produces is fruitfulness. Amazing things happen when we sacrifice. It produces eternal fruitfulness. In John 15:16, Jesus says it this way. He says, "You did not choose me, but I chose you." Man, that's good news. He chose us. And he appointed us so that you might go and bear fruit. Why did he choose you? So that you would go into the world and live a life of love and sacrifice. And out of that would come amazing fruit. Life-changing things would happen. That's what the fruit is. Life-changing. People's lives would be changed. People would be moved to seek after God because of your love and your sacrifice. That you might go bear fruit. And he says this, fruit that will last. Fruit that will last forever. And in all of this, there's love in the beginning, the middle, and the end, because deeply tied to love is sacrifice. I want you to jump into this video real quick, and we'll come back and we'll finish our message. You know, if you think about it, what has selfishness brought us? Well, what has selfishness brought us in our own life, or what has selfishness brought us in our country? And I would submit to you that it's brought us hopelessness and emptiness. I think hopelessness and emptiness played a big part in the horrific things that happened in Texas this week. Just an absolute nightmare. And at the heart of all of that, I would say, was the hopelessness and the emptiness that is so prevalent in our culture. It's so prevalent. See, our selfishness never takes us to a good place. We're supposed to be people of sacrifice, not selfishness. See, Christ's sacrifice for us was meant to inspire sacrifice from us. Yes, Jesus gave his life on the cross to forgive our sins so that we never have to pay that price. But that sacrifice is meant to inspire sacrifice from us. And maybe even after seeing the events of this week or all the things of the last 2 years, you just think, well, Mark, the need is so great. I don't know even where to start. I don't know where to give towards, or I don't know where to take my time and help. It's so overwhelming. I get that. I feel overwhelmed by it all the time. But I'd like to share with you some words that Andy Stanley said that I think are so appropriate. He said it this way. He said, "Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone." Do for one. Start somewhere and do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. And live a life of sacrifice. Now, I came across this quote by this guy named Howard Zinn this week. It said this. It said, "To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion and sacrifice, courage and kindness." To never forget that part of our history is amazing sacrifice. That's what this Monday is supposed to remind us of. That our history, even current history or just recent past, is not just filled with cruelty and selfishness, but it is filled also with sacrifice and kindness. And as a Christian, our story is filled with the ultimate sacrifice and with love. See, sacrifice is supposed to inspire more sacrifice because selfishness inspires more selfishness. So let's be people of sacrifice and let's inspire others to sacrifice. And as you sacrifice, I know that you will inspire others to sacrifice also. And see, the sacrifice that was made for us hopefully transforms into sacrifice from us. The sacrifice that we remember on Memorial Day is meant to transform. That sacrifice that was made for us is meant to transform into us sacrificing for others, not for us, but from us. The sacrifice that Jesus made on the cross for us is hopefully meant to transform into sacrifice from us. So I want to close out this message today. I want you to take a moment right now to think about everyone who sacrificed for you. Think about everyone. Maybe it's your parents or friends or teachers or pastors. Just people that have sacrificed for you. Take a moment, just think about them. And then ask yourself, have I transformed their sacrifice for me into sacrifice for others? And so to close this out, take a moment to think about who God might be calling you to sacrifice for. Who is God calling you to sacrifice for? we'll give you a moment to do that. We'll close out and I'll step off of here and we'll just give you a little background that you can look at and think about who maybe God is calling you to sacrifice for. And once again, thanks to all those who gave the ultimate sacrifice for us. Be blessed. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. God bless you. Take care.